Good evening, invisible friends. My name is Rinaldo Aguiar. My full name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano. And today is July 9th, 2025, and it's about 8 p.m. US Central Time. I am located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. This session, I'm going to make it a bit different. I usually start with the Guess Who section, but I'm going to leave that for the end because these individuals are more like a collection, a subset of different individuals, and rather than one very prominent agent. Okay. So I'm going to leave it to the end, and I have a few items, right, that I wanted to document in case anybody, like the real authorities, are watching these videos. Maybe the information could be useful, given that I'm in a way restricted, let's put it that way, here, and I cannot talk to the real authorities directly. So for today, I have a few items, and I try to prioritize them in a way that I want to talk about the things that could be more important at the beginning, at the start of the session, and then I'm going to move to more technical topics. Okay. So the first item, it's a tricky one. Okay. So this information came to me today from one of the Venezuelan informants. I exchanged some messages with them, with a couple of the informants actually, but this came from one specific informant who's been typically reliable. Like the things that he told me before seem to have been very accurate. And I cannot think of one instance in which he told me something that wasn't correct. There was another Venezuelan informant that in one occasion gave me bad information, like obviously bad information. And I think it was one of those cases, like they were probably trying to, I imagine, like what they did was that they fed information, bad information to multiple people, different pieces of information, to see which one I got, to narrow it down and try to identify who was the informant. Because he had been giving me good information for a couple of months, and then one day he gave something that was obviously wrong. But that is not this informant that gave me this information. This is a different one. Okay. And he told me something that I don't know. I don't. It's such a crazy idea that I don't know if I can believe it myself. Which says a lot because I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in this area over the last few years, and I thought that I had lost my ability to get surprised, like to get or to look at something and say this can't be true. This is what he told me, and I have to say that I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna give the information that I received because it could be right, and if it is, it could earth shattering. Like it could change the landscape completely. And if it's not true, I guess the consequence is that the informant is not reliable, and then I'll know that he's not reliable. And I don't think that, because I thought about this. What if it's one of those cases where they feed bad information to see what happens if I disclose it or not, to see if they can pinpoint the informant? But I don't think that would be the case in this case because it's such a sensitive topic that I don't think they would want to like add liability on that area just to flush out one informant. Like I don't think it would be that. If it's wrong, it's because he got bad information. I don't think it would. It was. So I don't think I would be putting him in danger. Is what I'm trying to say. Now, a couple of caveats before I say this. I don't know if this is true or not, but if it is true, it would implicate a lot of other people. And it would probably mean that those people are not in Venezuela, as it was presented to me. and they're probably here in the US, which also would up the stakes in a way. So that's why I'm inclined to say this, to pass this information that I received. Again, I don't know if this is true or not, and please take it with a grain of salt. But it could be. I don't know. This is what I got. So what the informant told me is that David Molero, or David Molero, and Salvador Mendez are the same person. It's the same man with two different identities. David Molero being the ringleader of the Molero clan that we talked about in yesterday's session, and Salvador Mendez, I've talked about him in different sessions before. So according to the informant, these two people are the same person. And I'm not going to get into the details of the implications of this. I imagine that if authorities are watching these videos, they would understand the implications of this and why I say that this would be earth-shattering. Like, this would completely change the game. And it would even put a timeline into when this operation was set up. And it would also implicate at least half a dozen people that are supposedly in Venezuela, and it would mean that they're here, or it would imply that they're probably here. They're not really in Venezuela. So that's the information I got. Now, this, I'm also saying this because if this is true, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if I could believe that. But if it is true, it's something that is really easy to prove as well. Because David Molero is here. And if he's compelled to give a DNA sample, that DNA sample could be compared against, for paternity, against the son of Salvador Mendez, who is also here in Katy. And I'm not going to mention the name of the son of Salvador Mendez out of respect for the innocent. That kid is here in Katy. And in fact, I think that kid, he got some blood work done very recently, I think on June 9 or June 10, 2025. I'm mentioning this because it's possible that the blood, the samples are still around in that laboratory. So that work was done at the Memorial Hermann Medical Group in Firethorn, and the address is 1713 Spring Green Boulevard, Katy, Texas, 77494. So it would be trivial to verify if this information is true or not. And if it turns out to be true, then it changes a lot of things. It would be earth-shattering for the bad guys. It would completely destroy any legal defense they could have in mind in many arenas. No, I'm not talking about me personally. I'm talking about how can they deny that they did all this. So that's why I'm mentioning that. Another important update. So it seems like in yesterday's session hit a nerve. There's no other way to interpret what's happening. Like today, these people were acting irrationally. I've seen things like this before, but very rarely, like maybe a couple of times before in the last 4 years. But today, like, they were acting erratically. And I've noticed a couple of things. I'm gonna comment on that. So first, I recorded, as always, with the Call mobile. I have 5 cameras, 2 are hidden. I don't publish those. I will give those to the FBI in person. But the ones that are visible are 3 cameras. They cover 360 degrees surrounding the car. And those videos are already posted on YouTube. I think I still have to post the back channel. So the left and the right are already posted. I'm going to post the back channel tonight. And they're in a playlist, organized in a playlist that has today's date. So a couple of things happened. So when I did that round that I got into the walled area of the landscaper and got the plates and everything, the man that was standing in there that looks like a freedom fighter with a beard, and that man has followed me multiple times. I would say probably that he has been recorded by the system and co-clustered together. I would say probably 10 times in the last 6 months. and I'm not running. When I was running, he intercepted me even more frequently. But yeah, so he got photographed by the cameras. So today, he intercepted me again, like maybe a mile away from my home. And then he followed me for about 3.5 miles. And at the end of that stretch, he followed me for 7, 8 minutes. And at the end of that, he basically started taking pictures of my car aggressively. He wanted me to know that he was photographing me, which doesn't really do anything psychologically. These people have right now cameras inside my home, and they have had cameras inside my home for 18 years. So somebody photographs me doesn't scare me. But anyhow, after that happened, a police officer came to my home at around 7 p.m. It was very nice. The police officer was very nice. Like, he didn't harass me. He was polite. He started saying that I was impersonating a police officer, the same thing that Philippe Denning did maybe 6 months ago with the security guard at Lake Point State, the same play. So apparently this man complained to the police, and the police officer had a recording of me using the siren, and I explained that it's a civilian siren, that otherwise I would not be able to buy the car, because these things are regulated by law. And then he was like, but this sounds like a police siren. Well, and I said, this might sound like, but that's not a legal concept. For it to be a police siren, it has to be of a specific frequency and have a specific cadence on the sound and pitch. There's sound characteristics that have to be present for it to be a police siren, and this one doesn't have those characteristics. So we had that little exchange, right? At the end of it, I'm just here letting you know that these people are complaining and that the neighbors are complaining. Apparently, many people are complaining about me. They're forming like a class action about me using the siren. So anyhow, I just wanted to post about that because I know how they weaponize the police. And I already had my fair share of encounters with the Fort Bend County Police. On that note, I'm going to mention something that I haven't mentioned before, but it's important. And when I say important, it could bring liability to Officer Gloria Badge 4137, Fort Bend County Police, like legal ammunition to get him to talk. So this is what happened. And I didn't mention this before because it's a serious thing. And as I always say, my objective here is to bring Diosdado Cabello to justice and bring Diosdado Cabello to the US. It's not to destroy the lives of these people. But given that they sent a police officer today, I'm going to say it. So a few days after that, Marcelo was kidnapped, removed from the home, and I called 911 the second time, and they dispatched Officer Gloria. By the way, contrast that the freedom fighter landscaper is able to get the police to come to my home and file a complaint so easily. But my child is kidnapped, and the police officer that comes to my home refuses to file a complaint. You see the injustice and the bias of the system in this. So anyhow, that day, I come outside to talk to the officer, Officer Gloria, and this is recorded and this should be in his body cam. What I'm going to describe. This was something that happened that is not audible, so it will not be recorded in the recording that I posted. So what happened was this. My former partner had bought, I think at Walmart, I don't know exactly where she bought it, but she bought a box of pens, okay, like writing pens. And that day, I took a pen out of the box and I came outside to talk to the officer. And as we were talking, when he was about to leave, he asked me for the driver's license of my former partner. So I went inside and had a copy of the driver's license and had a notepad where I was taking notes and a pen, the pen that I took out of the box, okay? And I had these three things in my hand. So I'm talking to the officer Gloria, and he tells me, I'm going to give you my card or something. I don't remember if it was a card or a piece of paper, but he gave me something. And he told me, you can write here the incident number, not the report number, because he refused to file a police report. It was an incident, okay? A number that starts with P, and all this is documented in the website. So he hands me, I think it was his card or a piece of paper, I can't recall. And then he tells me, use my pen. So he's giving me two things at the same time. He's giving me this piece of paper or the card and a pen, his pen. And I have in my hand a phone, that I'm using to record the conversation, a notepad, and my own pen. And he's doing this with the two hands and handing me these two things at the same time. So what I did is that I put my pen in my mouth and took his pen. I have this bad habit that when I need to use my hands and I have a pen in my hand, I used to have that habit. I will not do that anymore. I learned my lesson. So I put my own pen that I took from that box that my partner had bought in my mouth. I bit the pen. When I did that, the pen had a taste that was super bitter. It was a distinctive taste that I have never tasted in my life. The pen had something on top of it, a chemical. I don't know what it was. So when I put it in my mouth, the taste was so bitter that I started, I'm sorry for doing this graphic display explanation of what I did, but I started spitting saliva to try to wash my mouth and to remove with my fingers whatever was in the pen, right? When I did that, the officer smiled, like he smirked. It was a gesture, like he didn't say anything, but the way I read it, it was like, gotcha. So my theory is that there was something in the pen. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the smile of the officer at that point. I didn't understand why was he smiling, because I was making a face for about the bitterness of the pen. But what happened was, like half an hour after that, the officer left. I came inside my home. I started having heart palpitations, like my heart started beating very fast. And I got scared, to be honest. I thought I could be having a heart attack. I didn't feel pain, but my heart became very agitated, very accelerated. I don't know how to say it. I was in a situation where I didn't want to leave the house. I felt my life was in danger for obvious reasons. And so I wasn't in a position in which I could go seek medical attention. So anyhow, what I did, I took melatonin, like 20 milligrams, like a high dose of it, to try to calm myself down. And I think I took magnesium melatonin, like the two things together makes me very sleepy. If I'm working on something that has my mind occupied and I can't sleep because I'm thinking of that, if I take magnesium, I fall asleep. So I took that and I fell asleep, and the next day I was fine. And before doing that, I washed my mouth and tried to wash my mouth as the best I could, try to remove any residues that could be in my tongue from biting that pen. But anyhow, I think the pen was contaminated with something, and he knew it because he smiled when I bit the pen, and because he handed me these two things that, in a way, forced me to where was I going to put that pen? Like we were talking outside, there's no table, there's nothing in there. I could have put it on the floor, but then I would have to be like picking it up from the floor every time I wanted to write something. So I don't know. It felt to me like he handed me those two things, so I would put the pen in my mouth. That's the way I interpreted it. Anyhow, I have the box of pens, of course, and that particular pen saved in a plastic bag, sealed, waiting, hoping someday somebody looks at this. And if something happens to me and I don't get to talk to the authorities in person, if I'm not alive by then, go to the Britain Reach House, and in my safe, the pens are there. Okay. All the pens that came in that box, including the pen that I was using that night. And that pen is separated in a separate bag. Okay, talking about those things, other items, and this in the previous session or the session before, I said something like I was avoiding to go outside. Oh, when I was describing the episode with Marcelo, when I reported Wilmer Ruperti, I said I was afraid to leave my home for months, thinking that staying inside of the house, they would not be able to harm me. And then I said something like, but it turns out that I was wrong. They can harm you even if you're inside. And that's what I meant. They can harm you with things like objects that you put in your mouth, like your toothbrush or food that you buy at the store. There's multiple ways they can harm you, even if you don't leave your house. And I've learned this the hard way. So there's other items, food items, for example. These were documented in a previous session. I gave a list of all the food items that the informant warned me about them. That's why I didn't eat them, and nothing happened to me. But I have them saved and frozen. But there was one item that I haven't talked about, which is it's documented in the website in writing, but I haven't talked about it in video. And I want to do that today because we're talking about this topic. It's the water filter. Somehow, I don't know how, my slogan is I only find them, I don't explain them. I don't know how they did this, but they contaminated the water filters at my home, I believe, with heavy metals. And I have multiple data points why I believe this. I'm not going to get into details, but I'll tell the FBI in person, and I'll swear, I will do this under oath if necessary. I'm not making this up. They did contaminate. I'm 100% sure. To the point that when I realized that, I basically disconnected the filter to make sure that I didn't drink that water, not even by mistake. And then I was drinking tap water from the faucet for months, unfiltered water, basically, because I know the filter is contaminated. So that's that. Okay, so now let's talk about something else. Now I'm going to switch a little bit about more technical topics, okay? On the technical side of things, I've been doing this, let's say, radio hobbyist experiments where I have certain equipment, certain setup that I built myself, and I'm able to catch things that, like signals that come from the sky. Because now that I know that they're bouncing signals off the satellites, and I know where the satellites are because all this is public data, and I have the software that I wrote, and it's publicly available for everybody to use, it's at coca-net.com. So I have the technology to compute the bounce points and then when should I send a signal. And one of the informants is working with me in doing experiments with this. We're doing experiments where the two of us are catching things at the same time. And we're working together on this thing. I'm in Katy, he's not in Katy. It's super interesting. Like the things that I'm able to see when I decrypt streams of data are very interesting. And I'm also learning a lot about the infrastructure, about how they do it and what they do. For example, let me give you an example. I understood that I thought the system was more like a UDP. And here I'm going to get a bit technical and I'm not going to define the concepts because it would take too long. But if you're a non-technical person, I encourage you, these concepts are not difficult to understand. Don't be intimidated. They're simple concepts in reality. So if you see a term that I say, I'm going to transcribe the video and put captions in this. But if you see a term like an acronym that you don't understand, just look it up in Google. Google it, and you will find a Wikipedia page that explains the concept, what it means, okay? So I thought, until a few days ago, that the system was more like a UDP transmission in which there is no acknowledgement. Because they're bouncing these things off the satellites. So I thought it was like basically like unidirectional. point A is sending a message to point B and hopefully got it, right? But that's not the way it works. What they're actually doing is when the satellite is in that point where the 2 points could communicate, where point A could bounce the signal and it would hit point B also sends a signal, acknowledgement and other things, bouncing off the same satellite back to point A. So it's really a bidirectional communication using the same jump point. And this, I didn't know this. I saw it. And I saw it because I'm able to basically establish a kind of a TCP connection with the person that is working with me on this. So it's an amazing idea. Now, it's very weak. Their implementation is very weak. It's super weak. I can run circles around this thing at this point. I think the weakness relies on another thing I understood. I thought the channels were isolated, like really isolated. I thought the channels were physically isolated. And I've said this multiple times. I thought that the houses that end in 00 or addresses that end in 00 physically can only talk, but that's not the way it works. Basically, even a house that is not 00 can get temporarily, can serve as a rerouting point or as a jump point, as an intermediary point for a communication that is a financial communication. And this is a tremendous weakness. So basically, they're relying only on obscurity and the secrecy of the decryption key for security, thinking that, so the house, how do I say it? Imagine that you have 3 properties, okay? 2 of them are on the channel 00, and there's a third property in the middle that ends in 06. It's intelligence, it's not finance, okay? I thought that the 2 houses ending in 00 would communicate directly, but that's not what's happening. They are routing the messages from the 00 to the 06. The 06 sees the message but cannot decrypt it, but it can see it. It has to see it because it gets it and then reroutes it. And then decryption is only successful on the 00, that is the intended destination. But the message passed through a series of non-00 addresses. And this is a tremendous weakness because it means that I can stand anywhere and I can get any kind of message. I don't have to be, at the beginning, I was chasing specific channels, trying to get a specific types of information. For example, I'm very interested in the Bitcoin information, in the crypto, in the financial channel. But as it turns out, even if I stand on a house that ends in 7, like the Salt Typhoon in front of me, even if I do that, I can temporarily get messages. Of course, I wouldn't be able to decrypt them with the key that would be produced for that house. But if I can guess which would be the house that at the end would get the message, I can decrypt it. So this is super interesting because they're idiots, really. And they deserve everything that is going to happen to them. From a technical point of view, it's a terrible implementation. I think it's laziness. It's that what would I don't know. I don't understand what would have been the cost of doing it the right way, like really isolating the channels physically. It's, to give you an analogy, if you're building a bank and you're routing the network of the bank, and you with Ethernet cables, like you're using cables to wire the entire bank, and inside of the bank there is a Starbucks for some reason. I don't know, just to give you an example. If you were going to route all the cables in the bank, but the Starbucks is in the middle, and then I'm gonna just connect to the Starbucks, and then I'm gonna connect the Starbucks to the other servers of the bank. It's stupid. Like anybody who has control of the Starbucks or that has physical access to the Starbucks can intercept the communications, the transactions of the bank. And no bank would ever do that. That's more or less what they did here. Instead of physically isolating the channels, they're relying on software routing and obscurity of the encryption system, the cryptography to feel safe. But bad news, they're not safe. Anyhow, I'm learning a lot, and I see that the network is very weak. I have high hopes that if I can do this, I can't imagine what the NSA will do to them when they get these videos. So anyhow, I've been getting small things, right? Like I can get. Oh, but by the way, this thing is like an internet that they have. It's like a WhatsApp with Instagram, with email, with. It's a whole parallel internet. They have everything in that thing. So I can at this point I'm evolving. I'm learning, and I learn very fast in this area, and I expect to evolve on this very quickly. But I'm still learning. I'm still on the early phases of the learning curve. But at this point, I can get pretty good results. Not decrypt long things, but I can decrypt some things. And I can tell you, I've got some things that seem like financial transactions, and they're. I don't want to give too much away, but I want to give enough so authorities can investigate if anybody watches these videos. So one of the things that I got seems to be, I'm like 90% sure these are like car leases transactions. They seem like the amounts, like I have different reasons to believe that this could be lists of car leases. And the other things seem to be financial transactions that repeat periodically for, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but I did some experiments with data. And my theory, this is just a theory. I have no way to prove this thing that I'm going to say right now, but it's a theory, okay? Let's call it an informed guess. I think those transactions could be, I don't know what that's called in English. When you buy, it's not layaway. It's when you buy something, but you pay it in installments. If, how do you call that? If you go to Best Buy, and then when they offer you that credit card, when you buy something and they ask you, would you like to apply for the Best Buy credit card? You can pay for this in 6 or in 12 installments with no interest, that kind of thing. That's what they look like. And the amounts, so the amounts are repeated. And if you sum them up, they add up to prices of items that are listed, to sense some items that are listed on BestBuy.com. So my theory is that this is some sort of installment program. My theory is that they're using the Best Buy credit card to allow the agents to purchase electronics, and then they refund down the agents for a portion of the purchase price. The subsidy, if you think about it. So say, I'm here in this part of the mechanics of the financials, I'm guessing. Maybe they refund 100%. Maybe they give them the electronics for free. I don't know. But knowing them and how they think and operate, because I've been dealing with them for years, I would think that it's probably a subsidy. Say that you want to buy a computer that is $2,000. So Diosdado Cabello tells you, buy with the Best Buy credit card, and I'll refund you $500 in crypto, or I don't know, $1,000, half the price. The idea being laundering the money, the same thing that they do with the shell gas stations and the bookies, laundering the money by refunding it with crypto, and the agents pay with clean money, the credit card. I get the items at a discounted prices. It's a win-win-win-win situation. Everybody wins. The agent wins because he's buying the thing cheaper, subsidized. Best Buy wins because they're making a sale. The Diosdado Cabello wins because he laundered a percentage of the value of the item in drug money. And Xi Jinping also wins because he gets the 3% of the whole thing. So it's win, 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 win. So that's what I think is happening. And the other types of things that I saw seem to be car leases. And I have multiple data points why I think they're car leases. But I'm not going to give much details on that. But now I have the seeds. Like now I have, and this is that critical point. Now, every time I successfully decrypt something, I get more seeds. I get more viable seeds to decrypt more things. So that's why I say that it's a learning curve that is likely, it's not then like the normal learning curve, it's the opposite, it's exponential. The more I decrypt, the faster I will learn. So anyhow, car leases. So if I guess the tip to put it in a nutshell would be, I would try to find people that are marked in the index and are paying for car leases using credit cards. And those would be candidates because maybe they're getting the refund for the lease value because at the end it's a work vehicle. Maybe they're getting refunded in crypto for the car leases. And like in one of the rounds that I did recently, there was a person that had 5 car leases. I think it was a truck. It was brown or sand color, and it was parked inside that gated community that it's close to Lake Point Estates. Falcon Nest on Bay Hill Boulevard and Barton Creek. And the plate starts, and this is recorded in video and it's in the posts of the YouTube channel. The plate started with WDL, I think. So that house had 5 leases. Say that it's $300 each lease. So it would be $1,500 a month. So it's $18,000 of laundering potential for one house. You repeat this n times and it's something. Now, speaking of that truck, in the recordings of today, I did a round on the area that it's in front of Swim Academy. Swim Academy is super flag. And Marcelo, my son, my former partner, was taking him to classes there to learn to swim as a baby for 2 years or a year, right? And that location is super flag. And in front of it, they have a huge paramilitary settlement. That's what that is. And that happens to be on the back of a very prominent residential area that it's gated, okay? Anyhow, in that area, in front of the Swim Academy, in one of the perpendicular streets, there was a truck, brown sand color, exactly the same color as the one that I'm describing, the WDL one. Very similar. I haven't checked it with the pipeline because it was on my way back. When I go back to the office, I will check it systematically to see if the features are the same. But it seemed very similar to that truck. And what caught my attention is that it had no plates. They removed the plates on the front and the back, and it was parked on the street with no plates, which the police should tow it if the police were really doing law enforcement, and they would tow those vehicles. But that truck is the same color, and it seems very similar. So it's possible that after I reported it, they removed the plates and hid it in that area because I never drive towards that area on that street. It's possible. It's the same truck, is what I'm saying. And it's important because if it is the same truck, then it means that they're reacting to what I'm posting, and that's proof. That's another data point that shows that they are an organized group working as a team, as a group, towards a common goal, which I think is what the free world ultimately needs to prove. It's not a smoking gun, but it's one important data point. And speaking of that, this was picked up systematically by the system. The number of vehicles with no plates that are parked in driveways or on the streets is increasing significantly. Before it happened, but not with the numbers that we're seeing now. So it seems to be a thing. They are removing the plates of the vehicles, right, in mass. There's many vehicles in Katy that have no plates, and some of them are even circulating, like they're not parked, but like they're working on those vehicles with no plates, and the police doesn't stop them. But then they come to my home and say that I'm impersonating a police officer. So yeah, so that's the vehicles with no plates. Okay, so now I'm gonna do something radical here. I see that this network is so weak, the design of this thing, because it relied on the fact that nobody knew it existed. And if that premise holds, it's a secure system. Who is going to think of catching things from the sky when a satellite is in a certain point? Right? The probability of that happening before the geo index was leaked to the new world was null. But now that everything is public, this system is super insecure. So I see that it's so weak, the security and the cryptography of this thing, that I'm gonna tell them here right now what I'm gonna do now to their network. What I'm gonna do, so I have a roadmap, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is my next step, because now I can decrypt things. Oh, and I'm using, I didn't say this, but I'm using their network to send my messages. So I'm bouncing my signals on the same satellites that they're bouncing their signals. To make it more interesting. So my next step is trying to insert, this is what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna try to insert bytes into their messages. So I'm gonna try to corrupt their messages, to try to insert arbitrary things into their messages. So I'm gonna try to modify their messages. So when they send a message, if I manage to do it right, I might be able to change the characters or a sequence of characters. So for example, if the message says, let's meet at 7 p.m., maybe I will change the 7 for a 6. Something like that. That's the idea. So that's the first step. The second step, if I succeed at changing the messages, the next thing I want to do, my roadmap, is to change the instructions of the app. So if I'm able to control their agents, that's what I want to test. But this, I have to test it with the other guy, because if I'm sending bytes, the bytes are gonna end in the other location. So what I need to do is to send bytes to the location where he is, or that he sends bytes so they end up here, and I can observe the behavior. But that would be the ultimate test, if I'm able to control their agents by overriding the instructions of the app. So that's my end goal in my roadmap. Also, on the technical side of things, speaking a bit about the time of arrival technique, I modified the pipeline a little bit to try to detect patterns, and it seems to be the case, like that the cars really are acting as sensors that are static relative to each other. So that seems to be what they're doing. And now that I know, the detection is trivial. So the way would look like if you are a police officer or an FBI officer or counterintelligence officer, I don't know exactly what your role would be called. And I apologize for that, but I'm not trained in that area. But so if you're driving, if you're following me, what you would observe is that when I approach an intersection, there is a vehicle that will come from one of the lateral sides and will merge into the same direction that I'm traveling. And a few seconds later, like 2 or 3 seconds, or maybe even before this vehicle turns in my direction, another vehicle will come from another street, maybe 500 feet ahead or 300 feet. ahead of the vehicle that is merging into my direction of travel. But this vehicle is closer, like further away from me and further away from this other vehicle. And that vehicle will also merge. So at that point, I have these two vehicles in front of me. And the way to detect them is because the distance between these two vehicles doesn't change. Like they need to maintain that distance, because with that distance is that they can do the computation of the timing of arrival of the signal. So these two vehicles have to be traveling at the exact same speed, maintaining the exact distance between them, regardless of my speed. If I pass them, that's okay. But the important thing is that the two of them maintain the same distance between them and travel at the same speed. That's the. So I think this will be super easy to detect. For example, with the traffic cameras, it should be probably super easy. And I have in the spy help I have technology to flag this behavior now. I didn't have it before because I didn't know. I was looking, and that was the lack of understanding. Like my system was biased towards the behavior of one vehicle. And I do have models for things like collaboration, but it was more like about like blocking the view of the cameras or things like that. But because I wasn't aware of I hadn't understood the technique, really, the core of it, I didn't program a filter for this, where the relative behavior, and this is a deep thought. What I'm saying in this moment is something that this is an idea that is just coming to me in this moment. It's not formed in my head. So I can't really do a good job at explaining the idea, but it's like the design flaw in my design is that the design was made from a first-person perspective. Imagine that it's a video game. The game was a first-person shooter. It was designed from a first-person perspective, from the perspective of the operator of the Cold Mobile. But that kind of mentality in the design cannot see this pattern, this specific pattern, because the vehicles might not be in view. The second vehicle might not be in view of the camera. So it cannot be done that way. So the design mentality has to be from the perspective of one of the cars or God view. It doesn't mean that my design is wrong. It works for what it's doing. But to catch this, a different design mindset is needed. And that mindset cannot be first person, cannot be from a viewpoint centered on the Cold Mobile. It might be done using the cameras in the Cold Mobile, but the design philosophy has to change. It has to adapt to be able to catch this kind of coordinated multi-vehicle in movement schemes. It's an interesting challenge, and I'm gonna take on it. But yeah, so the vehicles are sensors and are acting as pairs of sensors. So you can think of them that way. And if you are following me and you try to like imagine that you're looking at what I'm looking at, what you will notice is that in no moment during my trajectory, wherever I go, there's not a single moment in which I don't have two vehicles either in front or two vehicles behind. This is a constant situation. And now that I know, I can see it. So that also tells me the motivation of what they're doing. What they're trying to do, the reason why they keep following me, because at this point, the index is public. Everything is public. The technology is public. The code is public. It's open source. The videos are already posted. I put them in the court documents. What's the point? What they're doing, I understood. Now that I can see that at every moment of my day, there's always two vehicles doing this thing where they're maintaining the distance and the speed between them. Now that I see that, I understand what they're doing. What they're doing is making sure that if I turn on my cell phone, they will be able to listen what I'm or read what I'm communicating with anyone. And the only explanation for that is that they're trying to find the informants. That's the only thing they could think they can get out of that. Like they're trying to see or to pinpoint who what these informants, which is telling. It's very telling. I imagine that if they find informants, nothing good is going to happen to the informants. Probably trying to find them to kill them. So it's very telling of their mindset in these moments. But anyhow, I wanted to mention that I think on the technical side of things, if I can summarize what I said right now, I would summarize it as number one, it is confirmed 100% that bouncing signals of the satellites is what they're doing. And not only that, but it's not unidirectional, but bidirectional with a handshake. It's a modified version of TCP IP. And it has acknowledgement. And also, I'm able to decrypt part of it. And I'm working on being able to modify the transmissions that they do. And after that, I'm going to override the instructions on their app. So I'm going to be able to control their agents. That's my end goal. And so that's the first thing that is confirmed. And the other thing that is confirmed is that what they're doing is using time of arrival twice to isolate the MAC address of the phone of the target. Now that they lost all the surveillance that they had, because before, remember, they sold me that Tesla. And in the Tesla, they had GPS, military grade, microphones, retransmitters, infrared light encoders. They had the Tesla is like a Chinese espionage machine on wheels. So when they had all that, they didn't need this. But now that I'm not driving that car anymore, they have to adapt. And now they're doing this thing. So that's the reason. That's the reason why they do this thing. So actually, I want to show an example of what that looks like. So let's say that we're landing and Gaston Road. That would be where Villa Sport is, okay? So the example I was giving you, and like this particular play, I've seen it repeatedly. Like they do the same play every time. When I'm driving on Falcon Landing towards Lake Point Estates, when I'm about here, so this would be Falcon Landing, let me see. Yeah, so the Villa Sport is over here. And this is like the, yeah, the high school is here. This is the high school, okay? So when I'm driving on Falcon Landing, when I'm about here, what they will do, they will bring a vehicle on this corner, right, around here, that will turn right. And when this vehicle turns right, then another vehicle will appear exactly here at the Penny Pools, I think it's called, where the pool store is in this shopping mall. Another vehicle will appear and will make a left. So at the exact same time, so at that time, they have one vehicle more or less here and the other vehicle more or less here. And remember, I'm traveling on this direction here. So after I pass the traffic light, I already have the two vehicles positioning that way in front of me, and they will be always keeping the same distance between them by traveling at the same speed. So in all that leg of my trip, if I turn on my cell phone, they will clone it. And then those vehicles there, and if I pass them, it doesn't matter because then they pull the same trick here. They bring one vehicle at this point, and the second vehicle from this there's another area, yeah, from this apartment complex that is also a Docker hood. So at that point, I have two sensors in front and two sensors on the back. They time the two vehicles and they come from two different directions. And of course, to an observer that is not looking for this pattern, it's impossible to see it. In fact, I didn't see it until I understood the thing with the goal structure and the rotating fan. But now that I know, I can see it. And of course, I'm making changes to my system to be able to detect this behavior and flag the vehicles that do it. So that's the idea. I was going to say something in addition to that, but it just escapes me right now. All right, so about the harassing incidents today. So one was that landscaper slash freedom fighter that followed me for 4 miles almost, and then started taking pictures and then called the police, okay? And filed a false police report saying that I was impersonating a police officer. I'm not dressed as a police officer. That is not impersonating a police officer. And that siren is not a police siren. But anyhow, the second incident was at the Shell gas station that is near Lake Point Estates. So I'm going to show that here in this map, okay? So if you go, and this is recorded in the videos that are already in YouTube, you can check them out if you have time. If you go to Lake Point Estates, there is a Shell gas station here that it's owned by this network, and they do the thing. It also has a McDonald's, so they fill the tank, and then they go buy the Happy Meal, and like they do the money laundering thing there. So that gas station is, I think, yeah, here where the McDonald's is. So this is the gas station. So the incident happened here. So what happened was I was like recording the cars in the gas station, and there was this dark sedan. The guy was following me. Oh, he was obviously following me. I have a miniaturized version of the system. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't run the full detection system, but it gives me with certain precision a warning if the car is flagged. And I got the warning, like that car is probably, when I run it, I'm 90% sure that it's going to be flagged. So anyhow, I parked next to him to record him when he got out of the car, because he parked at the convenience store as if he was going to buy something when he saw that I turned in that direction. So I parked next to him, waiting for him to get out of the car so he would be recorded by the cameras. He did not get out of the car. So he moved the car and then he parked his car here. And then after that, what I did, I moved my car as well and I went to the pump to fill gas, to put gas in the vehicle. But of course, I parked in a way that the camera on the back would record him when he got out of the vehicle. He did not get out of the vehicle either. Then I left and he also left. So when he left, he went on this exit and I went on this exit. And then he turned right and I turned left. So we basically encountered each other face to face and I passed next to him. When I did that, he rolled down the window and started basically banging with his fist on the cold mobile. Like he got physical with the car, which is stupid because it's an armored car. He probably hurt his hand. Like, that car can sustain gunfire. Like what is gonna do punching the car? But anyhow, I'm mentioning this because, and of course, he got recorded, and his face is probably, I haven't checked the videos, but his face is probably in the YouTube videos. He was a black man, probably like 220, 240 pounds, more than 6'0" in height. But what was interesting to me is that from my miniaturized system, I think the car was very prominent, but he acted stupidly. So that tells me that he's not an experienced, he might not even be an intelligence officer. He might be like one of those low-level Uber drivers that they use, but the car was prominent. So what that suggests to me is that they're flipping the world. So they're giving the prominent cars to the low-level people, and the prominent agents, the 7 agents, are probably taking the low-level cars, the cars that have no distinctive features. which would make sense. But I'm saying this because this man did that's a faux pas, right? In intelligence, or you should not get physical. Like, you're supposed to be covert. Are you gonna create a scene and somebody calls the police and there's a record of you being there? It's stupid. But anyhow, that's what he did. So I think I'll have to recalibrate my system to account for this, because it seems to me like they're just introducing noise, sending vehicles that are obviously flagged, that they know that are flagged because they probably already had incidents with me on those vehicles, and they're sending them with people that are not important. Anyhow, that's the game we're playing. Okay, so now after with this, I'm gonna conclude the technical part of this session, and I'm gonna talk about people that have been flagged. So this will be like the Guess Who segment, but it's not one person or two people, but like a series of people of different areas. I'm gonna read the names, and I'm gonna put them in the transcript, and I'm going to put them in the captions to make sure that they're spelled correctly. But I'm not gonna spend too much time detailing because it's a long list, and the info is in the website. So the first group is people from Yahoo, from the days when I worked at these people are super flagged. And I believe that they were a crucial part in the dismembering of Yahoo search to give it to Bill Gates and Microsoft. These are Stoyan Stefanov, Nam Nguyen, who is today a top executive at Meta's Instagram, and Julien Lecomte, a French citizen. Those are the people from Yahoo that I wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention this came from the informant. The informant told me that Jojo, the gym instructor of Villa Sport that teaches cycling, like static cycling, the message was like, she's more prominent than I could imagine. Something like that. That would be the translation. Jojo, although her profession is unassuming, apparently she is very important. The other person I want to mention is a guy called Jose Paulino Gonzalez. And this is another one of these kids from the oil company days in Venezuela. Also went to the same high school as I did. And he's very good friends with Marcos Castillo and Daniel Parra and those guys. And Jose Paulino Gonzalez is interesting because in Venezuela, he was a SEBIN agent, like, or a deceit, like, he worked in intelligence. Like, he was an intelligence officer. I wouldn't call that intelligence. That would be the equivalent. He was that. His job was that in Venezuela. And he's here in Katy and he's friends with these people. So obviously, he has to be a big part of this SEBIN operation here. Another thing I want to mention is a couple of years ago, Penelope Suarez, she started on a campaign of taking me to, or like, she was pestering me to register in a series of small runs in Houston, like a 5K. There was a 5K that we ran, and there was also a 10K. And those events are flagged by the pipeline, and a lot of people. So when you run in these events, they generate a list of participants. Okay. And I don't want to give too much details because I don't want to give the network any advantage. But in that list of participants, there are people that are very important in this network that were also in those runs. I don't know what was the angle. Like, I don't know what, because she had a very strong interest in taking me to that place. It felt a lot like when Maria Eugenia Rojas was pestering me to go to the Hamptons dinner. There was an angle behind that, because they sat me next to Paul McCartney, and Travis Kalanick had somebody from his team there. Or when Maria Eugenia Rojas was pestering me to go to that gala at the American Museum of Natural History. The same situation. She was pestering me for months. It was annoying. Like, I didn't want to go, but like, she insisted and insisted. So I went. This thing with the 5K and the 10K, Penelope, it felt the same way. And I ran the names of the participants through the pipeline, and there's a lot of interesting people in there. For the next item, I'm going to mention people from Twitter, okay? And I kind of ranked them in this list. So the top, I think the one that carries the most liability is Roberto Corneau, because he was at eBay. So he was a manager, a low-level manager at eBay. He came to Twitter to work in search, and then the network moved me to search to work kind of side by side with Roberto Corneau, me being an advisor. And then after Roberto Corneau extracted information from me, he went back to eBay and got a job as a director. So he rejoined eBay at a much higher position than he had left 6 months prior, just after extracting the information. So it seemed to me like a form of payment for spying for eBay. And he's a Chilean citizen. He's from Chile. Then we have Arnaud Weber, another French citizen, and he was my manager at Twitter, and he was the senior VP of revenue. And then he moved to Experience, it was called, a Bluebird team, which owned Search. And then he basically asked me to move to Search with him. So he moved me from revenue. He hired me for revenue. And when he moved, he took me with him to Search. So Roberto Corneau could extract the information for eBay, basically. So also a lot of liability. James Gao, a Chinese citizen, and his role was the equivalent to Andy Marton at Google. Like, he was my mentor. But he was just there extracting information. Then also within Twitter, there is a team that was called RP1. It was basically the revenue team, the billing team, the team that has the accounting system to keep track of the expenditure on the ads. And in that team, there's 4 people flagged: Dwarak, Pajam, Lubo, and Somya Vivek. All of them are flagged. Then there's another team that was managed by a guy named Luke Simon, or Simon. And he got kind of media attention because he made some comments when Elon Musk acquired Twitter. He said something derogatory about the engineers, and it got published in the Washington Post or in the New York Times. I can't recall where, but it was published, like his messages leaked, and the screenshots of what he said, something terrible. Like, he basically was saying that, and I don't know, I don't recall the thing because it was years ago, but it was terrible. Like, he was treating people like objects, basically, in the conversation, and making derogative comments about his own engineers. Like, he was the manager of these engineers. And then he got fired for that. So he is flagged as well. In that team, there's also a guy called, or was a guy called Kirill Lashuk, Russian. More Russian than this you will not find. And the name is spelled K-I-R-I-L-L. That's the first name. Last name L-A-S-H-U-K. Super flag. He's the equivalent of Alex Bot in local search in Google. And Eugene. If you put Eugene and Alex Bot together, you get Kirill Ashuk or James Newfield, who is also super flagged. Kirill for Twitter and also for Carta. So then he moved to Carta, which is a company, it's basically the way they spy on all the startups. Carta is the aggregator for that. I also flagged at Twitter Valerie Wolf with the name marker Wolf, Van der Linden, also Helen Friedland. She was my manager at some point. Kavita Kanetkar, also flagged. I've written about her dozens of times in the website. And from the search team, also Ajit and Vijay. They're from India. And super flagged, both of them. There's an account in the website in which I recounted a time where they extracted information from me, and then they started taking pictures of the whiteboard when I went outside to grab coffee. Like, that level of nonsense, to then give them to eBay or to the network. So that's on Twitter. And also, I want to mention a few people that are accountants, because in the last session, I mentioned these former officials from the IRS, but I forgot to mention that those ruses that they do when they weaponize the IRS are always in combination with your own accountant. So they will make you, or they will create situations that will prompt you to hire an accountant that is controlled by them. And that way they can like do things like make a mistake in the forms, or get you to write something that is not correct, or change something in the form and you don't notice and you sign it. And then with the officials of the IRS that they use to weaponize the IRS, they will trigger an audit, or they will send you a letter threatening legal action, things like that. So these accountants, in my case, were Veronica Sanchez here in Katy, Houston, and she was referred to me by Marcos Castillo and Daniel Parra together. So the story that they told me is that she was the accountant of Daniel Parra and the sister of Marcos Castillo. I saw that the last names didn't match. Like, she's Sanchez and he's Castillo, but out of respect, I didn't want to ask why. Yeah, I thought maybe, Marcos Castillo's father had an indiscretion and, had a child outside of the marriage. I didn't want to like ask an inappropriate question, so I didn't ask why the last names didn't match. But according to Marcos, she's his sister, but I don't know if that is true. And she was the one that made a mistake in my tax return and wrote my address. Instead of being 26714, she wrote 27715, effectively sending all my tax correspondence to the Mexican agent in the house dead to me. So I don't get the letters, and if there's an audit, I get in trouble because I never got the notice. So that's that play. Also on the accountants cluster is Howard Leeds from Federal Tax Service Company that's the name of the company, Federal Tax Service. They make it sound very official. They're in New York on 7th Avenue, I think. Or, yes, I think it's 7th Avenue with 23rd Street or something like that. And he was my accountant for years. And I was referred to him by Michael Schubert, kid you not. And so this is super funny. So I think the first year that I was his client, or the second year, I go to Howard's office. And he's talking to me and helping me. And he goes, "Oh, wait a second. I need to do something." And he left. When he leaves, I'm there doing nothing. And I look like this, and on top of his desk, he had left Michael Schubert, W-2, the tax form of Michael Schubert with his income for the year. He left it on his desk, facing my way. It was impossible to not look at it. And I looked at it, and the number that I saw, Michael was making like $10,000 more than me. Something that it was a small difference. He was making a little bit more than me, but it wasn't a big difference. I honestly, I don't know why they did that. But I knowing everything that has transpired over the last, I don't know, 12 years or 13 years since I met Michael, I believe that was not random. There had to be a purpose for Howard leaving that form in there so I could see it. But I don't know exactly why. But that's what they did. The other accountant is Don Robart, the accountant that Gillian Walsh, in combination with Michael Hughes, in combination with Lorna Hibbert, the friend of my former partner, and her husband, Derek, inserted into my life when the Canadian Revenue Agency threatened legal action against me in one of their ruses, the ruses of the network. And Don Robert is in Calgary, Alberta. But then when I started showing signs that I wanted to talk to authorities, Don Robert sold his accounting practice to another man that is from India. I can tell because of the last name. I don't have the name right now. And he's in the system, of course. So, Don Robert was basically replaced. Now, interestingly, this new accountant that took his practice and, of course, took me as a client because I was part of the clients of Don Robert. This new accountant, he lately, for the last month, he's been insisting in getting me to sign an amendment to a past tax document. I don't understand really why he wants me to sign that. Like, he's basically wanting me to sign an amendment to a past filing. I never asked him to amend anything, but for some reason, he wants me to sign that. And in fact, when he prepared last year's taxes that he did recently, he bundled that amendment with the main tax form for the last tax year. And like, I didn't sign it because I didn't understand why I would have to sign two different forms. And then he basically, but what I'm trying to say is that it felt like he was trying to trick me into signing that amendment. I don't know why, but I complained about it, and then he removed it, and I signed only the tax form for last year. But the next day, he started emailing me about me having to sign the amendment separately. And I really don't understand why I have to sign that amendment. I didn't ask for that amendment. And because of all this situation with these people here in the US and Marcelo being kidnapped, and I haven't had the time to look into that. And because it's an amendment for something that was filed 2 years ago, it's not a priority for me right now, but I'll deal with that after I deal with the legal issues here in the US. But for some reason, he's interested in me amending so I don't know, could be another ruse to get me in trouble with the Canadian Revenue Agency this time. Let's see what happens there. Okay, and to end this session today, I want to talk about the WebMD saga very quickly, okay? I have to say, if I start talking about WebMD, I could make multiple sessions of 1 hour each. It would be probably 10 sessions, okay? So this is just like to open your appetite on this topic. So what happened with WebMD was the following. Around 2015, when I started working on Code Mentor on the weekends, giving consulting to small companies, that's when they inserted Lawson Booth into my life. And he started getting me to work on projects that at the end were for WebMD. That's how I started working on the medical things, the medical projects. I had not worked on medical projects before. And I started learning about that space, and I realized that industry is very far behind of, for example, where Google is. The medical industry in the US, these EMRs and like the technologies they use are very old, are technologies from like the 2000s. Like they use MySQL databases and the things that are not of these times, let's put it that way. So that's when I started developing interest in doing something on the medical field. And that's when I built Calculator Health that Travis Kalanick stole the technology using Lawson Booth and using Dr. Baba and Ana Codalo and Alvaro Gutierrez, and a combination of different actors. And after they stole that, then they basically moved Mary Thacker to H1 to work on people search for experts in the medical field. And when you try to recruit me, and they offer me something that wasn't appealing to me, I said no. He didn't show me the technology, like he didn't show me a demo of what they had, but he explained to me the problem of trying to find experts in a field, in medicine, and how that was valuable. And he explained to me things like, what's the value of being able to identify these influential people? And I saw the value in that, and I saw that it was a space. I understood the pitch. So the first thing that happened was that I wrote a prototype to show it to Mayor, and I sent it to him over email and to Ariel Kratz, who was the CEO or is the CEO of H1. A prototype, a fully working prototype of key opinion leaders. I wrote it in 2 days over the weekend. And my objective by writing the prototype was to show them that I could really help their company. So they would offer me what I wanted to get, right, in terms of salary and stock and things like that. Anyhow, Ariel Kratz passed. He said, no, we're not going to offer you what you want. This is our offer. Take it or leave it. And I said, okay, no problem. And then I took my demo and I kept developing it for the next 2 years. And what happened with WebMD was that WebMD basically makes their money through advertisement. They target these keywords on the medical field that are very valuable for clicks on Google Ads and things like that. And they make $3 billion a year on advertisement. It's not a small operation. But the reason why we are in this situation today is because of that. Because when I created key opinion leaders, I created the technology in a way that it could find experts for any keyword, any medical keyword that you can think of. And it doesn't have to be like a super head keyword. It could be a very tailored keyword, like a specific types of cancer or specific types of proteins. Like it tells you who are the most influential people in the world for billions of topics in the medical field. So of course, I was going to take in Google search all the tail keywords because WebMD, they're only targeting the head because they only target the head. I was going to take the segment that eBay took in shopping queries, but in medical queries because they took the head queries only because they create medical articles. So it's the process that it's hard to scale what they're doing. Like it's content. So say that they have, I don't know, 20,000, 30,000 pages in the index, in Google Index. I could get 3 billion pages in the index easily. So I was going to demolish WebMD. And that's why they started with, that's when everything ramped up. That's when they moved me to Twitter, sold me the Tesla. Penelope Suarez did all the things that she did. Alvaro Gutes, Francisco Castillo, David Malero, like they basically went nuclear. Like they tried by any means possible to steal the technology and to keep me working on it because it wasn't only about stealing it. They wanted me to keep working on it, to keep developing it so they could steal it at the point of maturity. That was the goal. But I became aware of the surveillance and then I pivoted to building technologies to uncover their criminal network. And I applied the same technology I had developed for key opinion leaders, but instead of finding experts, it finds spies, but it's the same technology. And then in that process, on September 11, 2024, because of the harassment, the systematic harassment, and this part is explained in a video that I'm going to post the link in the description of this one. Because of how systematic the harassment was, I figured that it was coordinated with an app. And that led me to led me to certain technical conclusions that at the end led me to get a copy of the database that they use. And that's how I captured the geo index. And after I captured it, then I basically fed it into the key opinion leaders pipeline. And that's what became Spy Health. So that's a short story. Long story to tell you that WebD is super flagged. And it's an operation of control in the medical field because they control all the medical content that you can see on the internet. And if there's any company that tries to do something that competes with any of their keywords, they do this, right? They send the FSB, the SEBIN, the Iranian intelligence, and they harass that person and drive them into bankruptcy because they want to protect that $3 billion a year operation. But it's not only about the money, it's also about influence and control because they have the monopoly of the medical keywords. Then they can basically tell you and everybody else what medicines to buy and what to take. And then they complement that with the fact that this network, because WebMD is owned by this network also owns United Healthcare. And they also, via United Healthcare, they own multiple healthcare groups, and they also own CVS pharmacies. So you see, they have full control of your healthcare, from the moment you're looking for the information till the moment that you physically go to the pharmacy and buy the prescription. They control the entire funnel of your medical decisions. From the moment you read about the symptoms in WebMD to when you go to the doctor to when you buy the prescription that your doctor ordered, that they probably control as well, if you're a target of this organization. So it's a very dangerous situation. And on top of that, this network, and I know this because when I was working on the key opinion leaders technology, I tried to market it I even sent a salesperson to a conference in Paris to try to market the technology. And I was giving demos to pharmaceutical companies that were agents of this network. They only let me give the demos to their agents. Of course, they didn't buy anything. But in the process, after I captured the geo index, because I have the calendar appointments with all these people with their names and last names and companies, I can tell you that all these pharmaceutical companies are controlled by this network. So the healthcare of every single American is in the hands of this network and especially of the Iranians. And there's another session in which I talked about how they steal data from the medical record systems, the EMRs. So it's an area that it's I don't know if we're past the point of no return, to be honest, because they have such a grip on the medical information online, on the medical groups, the healthcare insurances, the, the companies that manufacture the medicines, and also on the points of sale, CVS, for example, or Amazon now has a pharmacy as well. So it's such a grip in the entire funnel of healthcare that it's scary. It's to give an idea, I can't go to a doctor. Like I know that if I go to a doctor, my life would be at risk. And if my back pain comes back, I have to resist the pain, and I can't go to a doctor to even get a painkiller because they will harm me with that. So that dangerous this is. And this is something that it's beyond my understanding. What could be the solution to this problem? Because it's from what I'm seeing from the data in the geo index and what I've seen through these years in this area of healthcare, since the times I was working with Lawson Booth till now, I just don't see how can this be reverted. It seems like it's so systemic at this point that I'm afraid that maybe it's not even possible to reverse it in the medical area. Anyhow, I just wanted to convey how critical this situation is in the medical area. And again, I'm at your disposal. If there's anything I can contribute, if there's anything, data or data points or names of companies or technology or whatever it is, I'm here to help. And I hope that I get a chance to contribute to help fix this problem. Thank you so much again for your time, and until the next one.